Hey guys, just a quick one today because there was an awful lot of explaining that needed to be done with a lot of the different scenes because the vocabulary was very, very densely packed. And so we did a lot of discussing today and didn't get through a ton of the story. And so essentially what we saw is the very first part, the very first visit, really, of the Ghost of Christmas Present and Scrooge to the life of the Cratchit family. Now, first of all, the Ghost of Christmas Present took Scrooge to get to this house through where they live, the worst of the worst of the poorest of the poor neighborhoods. Everything was just in shambles, and yet everybody on the streets and in the marketplace was thoroughly filled with Christian cheer. And again, I'm not preaching, I just want to make that very clear. It's not my job, but it is my job to relate to you just how this book would have an impact on an audience in 1843 in London, in England, which is where this book was published originally. It was a Christian nation. All of the laws of the country were and are set up to make sure that they enforce the laws of the Bible. And so this Christian cheer and spirit, the spirit of Christmas, named Christmas for Christ Mass, this sense of goodness and joyfulness and cheer is alive amongst the poorest of the poor. And Scrooge says, well, why do the poor need it the most, or why do the poor get it the most? And the Spirit says, because the poor need it the most. And Scrooge says something really stupid here. He says, well, correct me if I'm wrong, Spirit of God, because we find out that that's exactly what the Ghost of Christmas Present is. He's essentially God's messenger for God's purposes to spread Jesus' message of joy, hope, peace, love, comfort to everybody on that particular day. In fact, his job is so big he only lives for that one day. And he's had 1,842 brothers before him. So Scrooge says, hey, if you're supposed to be like making these people happy, then how come you don't do it every day of the year? Like, isn't it your fault that they're in such bad shape? This is when the Spirit of Christmas Present kind of goes off on Scrooge and says, me? I'm the reason they don't have cheer and hope and love and joy and peace the entire year? I'm the reason? No, my friend. It's people like you who are stingy, who are mean, who are hateful, who are bigoted, who are selfish, who are greedy, who are all of these things. It's people like you that make it so that there are people like that. If everybody who had everything shared with the people who have nothing, he wouldn't need to come around but once a year and spread that cheer. It would be done already. So he's saying there are lots of you in this country, just like you, who claim to be worth their weight, who claim to be Christian, who claim to be all of these things, and yet do nothing to help the people around them or the world around them, or spread the message of Jesus to them. And he says something that's unbelievable. He said, these people are worth 1,000,000 of you. One of them is worth 1,000,000 of you. And he says, flat out, which is terrifying to a Christian audience in 1843, that people like you, who hang on to their own possessions, and who don't give, and who don't participate in being a good person, he's saying, when you get upstairs, God's going to look at you and say, I don't know you. I never knew you. And that's terrifying because where does a Christian who God claims to not acknowledge go? Below. Eternal damnation. Forever. That's pretty scary stuff. And that's a pretty stunning revelation to Scrooge that, oh my gosh, it's my fault. It's people like me that cause all of the poor to stay poor and to be miserable. Pretty scary stuff. Especially when they get to the Cratchit's house. Because we see that this family that's so battered around by life, they're the merriest. And their little, pardon me, their little boy, who is afflicted probably with polio, it's a treatable disease if you had the money for treatment and medication, which is really expensive. But if you don't, it attacks your body in such a way that you become crippled, paralyzed eventually, and wither away and waste away and die eventually. And this little boy, and think about little boys, and little kids in general, but especially little boys, their favorite word is mine, or me, or I. Kids only think about themselves, and yet here's this boy who is so pure and so much the embodiment of what it means to be a true Christian at this time. Okay? At any time, really. But particularly in 1843, when the situation was so bad for so many people, he said, I hope that people saw me with my crutch and my braces and the fact that I'm crippled. I hope people saw me in church, because even if God doesn't heal me, they would at least be reminded that there were people that got healed and that a miracle is still possible. Just grabs at your heart. Just like in modern day, go visit a pediatric cancer ward. I mean, hopefully you never have to be there yourself or never have to visit anybody there yourself, but go visit one. Those kids are so happy and so joyful that they don't even acknowledge the fact that their heads are bald and that there's IVs coming out of their arms or out of their chest or whatever. It's almost like they're just a regular kid, and they just want everybody to be happy and healthy. And so Scrooge the light bulb turns on. And he says, this is how I'm supposed to be acting. This is what it means to be worth a spot on this earth. And the Spirit even goes so far as to use Scrooge's words against him. Because Scrooge says, please tell me Tiny Tim's not going to die. And the Spirit says, of course he's going to die. He's got a disease. They can't afford treatment or medication. And he says, but wait a minute, Scrooge. Didn't you say that all the people who can't afford things like proper housing and proper medication and food and all this stuff, shouldn't they just die and decrease the surplus population? Oh, that was before you realized that all those people had a face, a name, a soul, a family. Scrooge is learning some pretty powerful lessons. And it's showing, by the way. When Jacob Marley says you have to learn these lessons and you're going to be visited by spirits to learn it, Scrooge says, nah, no thanks. And then the Ghost of Christmas Past comes. And he's forced to go along with him. He doesn't want to. But he starts to learn. And he starts to be taken back. And he starts to feel all these emotions. To the point where he goes, fine, I get it, Spirit. Just please stop torturing me. I get it. I understand. I'm learning. I get it. Just let me go home. And then when this guy shows up, he says, Spirit, last night I was forced. Today I want to go. I want to learn. We are seeing some huge character changes in Scrooge. And really, that's at the core of the author's purpose and the main idea, isn't it? Changing yourself in order to become a better person, especially given the time of year it is. It's all starting to make sense, hopefully, if you're really focused on connecting with these characters, the audience of the time period, and then updating it into our own time period to see whether or not you're worth your weight as a person, or if you're really doing more to harm the people around you and yourself than you are to help the people around you and to be a help yourself. Great stuff here, guys. And thank you for participating in these conversations and for doing your sternal cans at home. By the way, yours for today is down there. It's all about why the Ghost of Christmas Present would show him all these poor neighborhoods when those people are so unlike Scrooge. Makes sense if you think about it and if you're doing some really quality thinking. And I appreciate you continuing to do that. Have a wonderful day. We'll pick up where we left off tomorrow. We're getting actually pretty close to the last third of the book, which is crazy because we've only been reading for a short amount of time, but this book packs a punch. It's pretty tightly packed, and so thank you for bearing with me and being so involved in unpacking it. It's much appreciated. See you guys tomorrow.